Hi guys, it's Jackie. I'm just going to take you through how to make or set up your own Dropbox. So you just start at the home page and we're going to go up to Assessments and click on Dropbox. So I'm working on an old site. You'll see there's quite a few Dropboxes set up for health behaviour. We're going to set up a new one, and so we need to click on New Folder. Once we're into the new folder, we've got to set up the folder properties. So first off, we need to give it a name. So I'm going to give it Health Behaviour Journal number 9. Underneath the name, you'll see that there's plagiarism detection. So we're going to actually click this box, Enable Plagiarism Detection. And so this actually links the student's submission to Turnitin. Once we click on this box, you'll see right down the bottom a new section opens up. And so you need to make sure that when we come down to plagiarism detection options, that when we have display, we click allow submitters to see originality report. And that's important because it allows the student to see just the actual report and how much percentage of plagiarism their work has. We want it just to be available to students at all times when submitting, so we just have it as now. And then we want to leave all the rest of these buttons the same. So we want to make sure that it does detect plagiarism on all of the submissions. So we leave that first one ticked. And then also we're going to leave all of these boxes ticked, which are just telling Turnitin what it should be checking against. Scrolling back up, so after we've set up plagiarism detection, and remember that if you're using ePortfolio items, you can't actually use Turnitin because it won't be able to read the file. We're going to leave the folder type as individual submissions, just meaning that a student is just submitting their own work, not as part of a group. You can also add a category. So a category is just within the Dropbox section itself that students will see. So you might have categories if you have several different Dropboxes like we do in health behaviour, so that means we have 2 categories. But if this is just one Dropbox, you might just leave it without a category at all. We can also link the Dropbox directly to a grade item. So if you haven't already set up your grade items, as you can see here we've got quite a few for health behaviour, you can actually just create a new grade item. So we might call this grade item Health Behaviour Journal 9, which makes sense. We don't really need to give it a short name. Again, categories, depending on how many grade items you have. We have quite a few, so we've divided ours up into different categories, but again, if this is the only grade item that you have, you might just want to leave that without a category. We then want to put in how much it's worth. So for instance, you might be putting in a lab report that's worth 45% of the mark, so we just need to put in 45 there. We are then going to leave these 3 boxes unchecked. We're leaving them unchecked because essentially what it's asking is, can the student get more than 45%? Can they get bonus marks? And do we want to exclude that 45% marks from the final mark? Because we don't want to do any of those things, we're going to leave it unchecked. The grade scheme I think is perfectly fine at the default scheme, which is percentage, and when we get out of this grade section I'll show you what that looks like, so I would just leave that as it is. You might also want to add a rubric. Now you can actually start creating the rubric straight away if you haven't already done one by clicking on Create Rubric in New Window, but also you have access to creating rubrics in other tools, so you can go in, make your rubric, come back later and actually attach it to the grade. You can also attach a rubric to the Dropbox, and so essentially those 3 things will be connected together. So the gradebook will be connected to the rubric as well as the Dropbox. And then we have restrictions about visibility, and this might be just your personal preference, but I just tend to leave the grade item as always visible. And click Save. Again, we need to put in how much it's out of, so 45, and this is where you get to see what that kind of default grade item looks like, and you can see here that the student view is that they get the number out of 45 and then also the percentage, so if they get 45 out of 45, they get 100. Again, the Dropbox gives you an opportunity to attach a rubric. As I said, you can do it now or you can add it in later once you've actually made up the rubric. Now, custom instructions. This is actually really important to remember, and probably a really key part of the Dropbox is a plagiarism and collusion statement. So I'm just going to copy and paste one in. But essentially any Dropbox you have should have this statement or a very similar one. So you can see here, this statement is actually telling the student that when they press submit down the bottom when they're submitting their assignment to the Dropbox, that they're actually agreeing that they have not plagiarized or colluded with another student. So this really needs to be in place because I guess it supersedes the old paper version that we used to get students to print out, sign and attach to their assignment when they were handing in a paper copy. So it represents exactly the same thing, and very important that you remember to put it onto your Dropbox. Ian's group would be easily able to give you this exact statement, or you could email me and I would be able to copy and paste you this exact statement as well. Next, we want to make sure that this box is ticked to allow users to add this folder to their e-portfolio. So what that means is that when they submit this piece of work to get marked, it is actually dragged back into the student's e-portfolio area. And I think this is something that we need to get used to doing so that students can collect pieces of work as they go along throughout their course. You might have some other instructions that you might want to attach here. And then lastly, we just need to decide on the submission options. So again, this probably has to do with more what kind of assignment you have, but in health behaviour we like to select one file per submission. So this just means that students can't submit 20 different files to the Dropbox, they can only do one. But then I also choose override submissions. So this means that students, if they've made a mistake, can actually go back in and resubmit a file. It just overwrites that original file. And then we've already done plagiarism and detection options, so we can click save. We then want to click on restrictions. So it allows us to do three things within restrictions in terms of availability dates. The first is has a start date. So you might tick this if you don't want the Dropbox to be visible until a particular time. If you don't care, so you want the Dropbox to be open from the start of the semester, you wouldn't have that ticked. You can also do two things. You can set a due date. So this might be that the assignment is due on the 11th of April. And so what happens is that anything that's submitted after the 11th of April will actually come up as being submitted late. It will have a label that says late submission. So this means that you can kind of keep the folder open for longer for all those late submissions, but you actually know which work has been submitted late. You can also then have an end date, and what this will do is actually close the Dropbox. So remembering the due date doesn't close the Dropbox, it just indicates every person that submits after the due date. The has end date actually closes the Dropbox so that nobody else can submit. So you might want to have the due date as the 11th, but then because of late penalties you give them an extra week, and so the folder itself doesn't close until the 18th. We then want to just leave the special access as it is, so allowing users with special access to submit assignments outside of the normal availability dates for this folder. On a side note, if you are actually trying to hide the folder so that people can't see their feedback, perhaps you've been pressing publish when doing your marking, you can actually click on only allow users with special access to see this folder, and it completely hides everything from the students. But just for normal purposes, it's fine to just leave it as this allow users with special access to submit assignments outside the normal availability dates. And then you can add users that you've given extensions to. We're going to press save. And lastly, if you're using objectives in your unit, you can actually link those associated learning objectives in this section. So just going back to properties, we just need to pick save and close. And you'll see that now my health behaviour journal, because I didn't put in a category, is up here. Dropbox waiting for people to be able to submit. The last thing I wanted to show you is just this section where I've actually just submitted something as a demo student after the due date, just to let you see what that due date function actually does. So you can see here that it was submitted late. It comes up in big red letters to allow you to know what late penalties you need to apply. And that's about it. So if you do want to talk to me a little bit more about Dropboxes or setting them up, please email or send or ring me. Also remember that Ian's group is really good at setting up Dropboxes as well, so they're a great contact to have. Have a lovely week.